We're on YouTube. As promised, we've got the suspension back together. We are going back focusing on the oil pan. I did not do a video of the removal. There's a really good one. Robert DIY has one out there. A couple other folks, but I think Robert's is probably the best and simple. From that standpoint, here's an oil pan, oil filter. But what I want to talk to you is something you see a lot on the boards and blogs, and there's a lot of discussion around it, but let me show you. And the pan's not done, by the way, just for anybody who gets anxious. Right here are two O-rings when you drop it down. They're sitting in the block. This is flush. Okay? They're sitting in the block, and when you pull it down, and they appear to be somewhat of a source of consternation on high mileage, or maybe not even so high mileage, but idle, hot, oil light flickering. Well, these are really well designed engines. Oil light flickering and without any apparent noise, it's obviously for concern, but it's like, why? Why would it do that? The tolerances don't seem to be bad. You don't hear any slapping, knocking, any craziness. So I decided to follow my forefathers and take a look at this. So here's the large O-ring. It sits right here. You can see the witness marking around that. It is not very pliable. You notice right there, I just split it. So it's hard, and it is supposed to maintain the space in between the pan and the block. Well, if it's no longer pliable, well, obviously it can have some issues. But the more important one, the more concerning one, is this one. Now, if you can see that, how that came out, that's it. That is exactly how it came out of the block. If you could look, it wasn't happy. I don't know whether that was done in a service or whether that was from the factory, but it is smashed. So it had basically sitting right here in this space, right like that, it had a very good opportunity to be drawing a little bit of air in, especially during low RPM. So you'd rev the engine, everything would be fine. We're all set. The other thing to note here, this is the oil pressure relief valve in here. The filter is on the other side. You have a clogged filter, it's going to basically blow out. I had one ordered, didn't make it in my order, so they're resending again, but weather's turning, I got to get this thing done. So I'm going to have to gamble. So from that one, the other part I pulled out over here is the oil pickup tube. Nothing really dramatic inside as far as buildup or gunk, but it too has a square cut O-ring. And it's a very nice big one. This one appears to be pliable. Doesn't seem to be breaking. And what was more of an interest to me was I bought the kit that they sell for this one. There's the Volvo part number as well as the other one. It says, got everything you need for the sump. Well, it's got everything you need for the sump except that. So probably it's a low cycle issue, but the O-rings all come in their own individual pack, made in Sweden. You get dipstick tube and a few other ones in there. But if you're looking for it in that kit, I'll just tell you up front, it's not there. Okay, so from that one, we are at the point, everything's dripped off, everything's fine. We're going to put the sump back in. I'm going to have to go with that one. It seems like it's going to be no problem. And we're going to finish cleaning this up. It was kind of nasty. It doesn't look like a fashion model now, but it's there. The other thing we had to special order is right here. These are the oil cooler O-rings. So instead of taking the coolant out of the engine, I just unbolted 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts, and the oil cooler sits on the back of the pan. Unbolted those and just took it off that way and ordered in these new O-rings. So we'll replace those out. What is interesting, I'll show you underneath, is the oil cooler itself. It's flat. It doesn't have a groove or anything. So these are actually raised, and they sit in that groove, and they provide a seal. So it's going to be a flat surface to the edge of that seal. So it's got to be right. So don't play any games. It's going to be something that's I don't know, $6 to $9 to replace and not worry about it, or try to play a game and lose. So, alright, I'm going to get you underneath the car. I'll show you just what this looks like on the block, and then we'll get going. Okay, this is an oil cooler. You know, so it's setting free. I don't know if it was unbolted, but here's what I wanted to point out, that it's flat. There is no groove for those O-rings, the big green ones I just showed you. So clean this off, make it nice, and then go ahead and put that back in there. And okay, so as far as under the body, change the angle here. There we go. Those O-rings, the sump goes back here in the back, so that's where it sits. There are two 10mm bolts which bolt up the pickup tube to the bottom of the block. Here's where the large O-ring goes. Here's where the small O-ring goes. So that's the transition between the bottom of the oil pan and the block. Well, these are recessed. You probably can't see it really well. Getting close. They've got grooves that O-ring is going to sit in. The trick is getting the pan back up there without knocking those O-rings out of position. So we're going to have to work on that just a little bit. I currently have the engine raised up. You can probably see it. There's a wooden block right here. I took off the 2 bolts on the motor mount and just lifted it. I think I'm going to give myself a little bit more clearance, and I might even reach in there and loosen the motor mount a little bit more. But where it got into being a little bit of a hassle was right here on the fuel line. It snakes around right around the front of the block. It was a little bit of a grumpiness in that space. So anyway, as far as the rest of the lower part of the block, no surprises. High quality, well built. PCV comes down right here. This is where those chunks will fall out if your PCV system isn't maintained. Better shot of that. Right here. This guy right here. The square block. Sorry, pointing upside down and backwards. See that little rectangle? That's the one. Okay. Underneath, everything looks okay. No, just show off from the previous video. Lower control arm looks nice, all clean. It's all good. So beyond that, we also have to do a thermostat. We have to do a temperature sensor and a few other things. But I need to get this block back on here. It uses anaerobic sealant, which is the stuff you put on and roll on, and then it seals in the absence of oxygen. So this block will be spotless by the time I get there, and then we'll roll that on. I'm going to definitely get this pan back up in there today, because the weather's okay, but it's next week doesn't look any better. So since we're working outside, because I have too many machine tools in the shop, we will do our best to get this knocked out. And my son-in-law wants his car back, so I better get it done. Alright, thanks. I'll be back. Okay, we're not going to forget to put the sump in, but I'm going to put these O-rings in place first. Here's what I use. The transmission assembly lube. It's a little stickier than just a normal grease. It works out really well, especially in auto trans, where you have some seals that you want it to maintain a certain position. It's very sticky. You could get by with a grease, I'm sure, but this stuff dissolves into nothing by design, so we will leverage what we have. Okay, very sticky, very gooey. It won't impact the way the O-ring works. It won't attack the O-ring material. It plays well with rubber, Teflon, whatever, steel sealing rings, whatever you got. Okay, once we got that in place, if everything goes to plan, this ring should fit precisely into that hole. Okay. And again, it's going to be protruding because it needs to. But as long as I'm not too clumsy, and and I bring the pan up at a fairly straight angle, I should be okay. Okay, you can see that stuff is fairly sticky. Now I'm going to wipe off the excess. Get that out of the way so it won't interfere with the other sealer. But underneath that O-ring it will be stuck pretty good. And I'm going to chase this with some acetone. I don't have any denatured alcohol out here this morning, but I don't think it's going to make a big difference. Okay. Oh boy. Acetone. And this is just to get the sealer to react with the aluminum. These O-rings really won't be a problem, but the sealer is going to come down through here and around, and it really won't do much interaction with that. Now I've cleaned this, even scuffed it lightly, and that is what you see left over is pretty much just what's in the machined grooves. Very, very thin, but it's just there. It's not going to hurt anything. Okay, I'm going to bolt the sump in and get back to it. Okay, all the surfaces are dry. The pan's cleaned up. The sealer is applied. Anaerobic sealer. Very thin, but it's going into two machine surfaces. You don't need a big glob of it. So next step is we try to tuck this thing in there. Interesting. Alright, we are going to do that, and I'm going to bring you back because it's not going to be very viewable. Let me see if I can get it in, and then see if I can find some pointers I can bring you back out and talk about. Alright, thanks. Okay, I promised you a couple of tips as we're putting it in here. Hey Dan, the oil pan's not on yet. I know, but let me show you something. You might find it interesting. Okay, right here is the joint on the leading edge of the pan. Okay, it kind of comes in and goes around. One of the things you have a trouble with is right here is the engine fuel line. Okay, not a lot of extra. Here's the bracket for it. That's loose. Here's this. There's a front bracket with a 110mm bolt. It's loose, but it butts up against the motor mount bracket. This is the bracket that your motor mount bolts to, and they don't play real nice together because normally it's right here in this space. So I've got the engine raised up, but there's a clearance issue there, and you want the straightest angle you can get going in. The reason for that, if you jockey around, you're going to knock these O-rings off. So what I did is, out here you've got your lower bracket. There's a 10mm bolt right about here, right here. Loosen that. Loosen this bolt, but do not remove this one. This is a 12mm. Do not remove it because it's in there up against this shield, and you're just going to spend a lot more time screwing around. And then there are two more bolts, these guys, that come on the other side of the engine mount bracket. So there's two 10mm bolts over here. They're easy to get to, no problem. I pulled the inner wheel shield out. It's no problem. You can see my hand right through there, so you can get access to it. But loosen the 110mm on this bottom crank shield, which is what covers the timing belt. Loosen it. It'll give you enough room to get your wrench on to break this one loose. Once that's loose, bring it out a few, I've got it out a few threads. It loosens this and allowed me to take this fuel line and get it down and over it. So now the oil pan has a straight shot straight up. Now there's a little bit of a clearance jockey around this guy, but it's not too bad. Here, you see that, yeah, right here, there's just a little bit of clearance issue there, but again, my intent is to try to go up as straight as I can so I don't have any drama with the O-rings. They're stuck in there. You notice they've been there this whole time. They're not going anywhere. But if I bump them and shear them off with the leading edge of the pan, things could get really interesting. So I want to avoid that at all costs. So anyway, I'm going to drop this pan up in here and then I'll bring you back. Okay, we're going to try to run it in real time here and see just how bad this gets. I'm going to pull out a couple of oil and screws. Don't touch the surface. A little bit of a clearance issue in the back. Power steering line. Okay, so I need to come up first. Slightly. Up. So far, just getting it past the power steering line was not the problem. We haven't come anywhere near touching anything. Okay. Okay. Ooh. You heard that ominous whoop? That's pretty much it. So appears to be up. I'm just going to suspend it with a couple of these little ones. Okay. Really not a great place to reach into. Well, it's probably why I shouldn't. Come on. There we go. There's a straight shot going up. It's not a problem. There's that one there. Now the sealer won't start doing much until it's oxygen free, basically. Okay. Oh, well, that wasn't bad at all. Do it again, I would follow Robert's idea and tie this off real tight. It was really one of the only things, and near as I can tell, everything else went up straight and smooth and true. So I think we should be in good shape there. Again, there are different pan bolt lengths. I've tried to keep everything in order, so rather than have you watch me screw in a bunch of pan bolts, I'm going to bring you back when I start the tightening sequence. All right, we'll be right back. Okay, we fired it back up. We're topping off the oil, and no radical engine sounds. Everything appears to be okay. Oil lights off, service lights on, obviously. Check engine lights on. That would be an upstream oxygen sensor heater, which I haven't got to yet. But fortunately, the sensor heater doesn't really have any impact, and especially being an upstream sensor, it basically just monitors. Well, basically it doesn't do much. It's just for the light off. In other words, to get it into closed loop quicker. It's not really going to affect its day-to-day operation. So signals there, no rich or lean codes, just an issue with the other. Look, ratty vacuum lines you need to deal with. Nothing out of the ordinary. Okay. No runs, no drips, no errors underneath. So far, we'll drive it, we'll check it for leaks again. But until then, I believe we got this one done. I'll lower it down, drive it. If there's anything that comes up interesting, I'll bring you up to speed on that. Okay, that's it for the House of Broken Doubts things on the oil pan. See you next time.